Hi there, my name is Scott McDonald, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to do an Airbaby. The Airbaby is a one-arm balance that originated as a b-boy freeze, but it's since become popular in the yoga, hand balancing, and movement communities. Before attempting the Airbaby, you should be comfortable in a frog stand, a crow pose, and a croc, or turtle freeze. You'll notice that in the frog stand, your knees are outside your elbows, and in a crow pose, your knees are higher on your tricep than you would do in an Airbaby. A good exercise you can work on before you work on the Airbaby is to get into a frog stand with your knees on your elbows and then shift your weight to one arm as you extend the opposite leg. Alright, before we start training the Airbaby, here are a few quick tips that are going to make this process much faster. Tip number 1. Everyone has a certain style of clothing that they prefer to wear and prefer to train in. But when you're doing the Airbaby at first, it's going to be much easier to learn if your knee skin and your elbow skin are exposed. Wearing fabric on either your knee or your elbow, or even worse, on both, is going to make an already difficult balance even more slippery and hard to control at first. Once you know how to do an Airbaby, wear whatever you want, but when you're first learning, trust me, it's going to go a lot faster if you're just wearing shorts and a t-shirt. Tip number 2. This sounds like cheating, but it's actually the greatest hack ever for Airbabies, and I wish I knew this when I was learning. You can literally glue your knee to your elbow. When you're first learning the Airbaby, there are a lot of different factors, all of which make it difficult, and this removes the possibility of slipping your knee off your elbow, which allows you to focus on the other 999 things you have to figure out. If you're going to do the whole gluing thing, make sure you don't have hair on your knees or your elbows, or you're in for a really unfortunate waxing experience. Tip number 3. When you're first learning how to do the Airbaby, the skin on your tricep is going to get pinched, it's going to get burnt, it's going to get a little bit bruised, and it's not going to feel too nice. This goes away. This is only the case for the first few sessions of training it, so please don't let this dissuade you from working on the trick. But a lot of people try and get around this by wearing elbow pads or knee pads. I highly recommend against this for the same reason that I recommend not wearing a tracksuit when you train. Having a knee pad or an elbow pad or a knee pad against an elbow pad makes it even harder to balance and find the right stack with your knee and elbow. Okay, our fourth and final tip is to train on a hard, flat surface. Even though you might be worried about slamming your knees into the ground, it's going to be much harder to find your balance, and you risk injuring a wrist if you practice on a squishy floor or on a mat. I recommend hardwood, concrete, or even grass. Alright, now that all that's out of the way, warm up your wrists and let's learn how to do an Airbaby. In the back of your elbow, there's this little notch where the tricep and the elbow meet. And in your knee, where the quad and the patella come together, there's also a groove. These two fit together perfectly if the knee is bent and the hamstring is engaged. This is the stack that you use for your Airbaby. You'll also notice that the forearm and the lower leg form a straight line when you're properly aligned like this. If your knee isn't fully bent, then your kneecap is going to slide upward and cover this little groove, so make sure you're always pulling your heel towards your butt with your hamstring. If you think of an Airbaby, if you were to look at it from above, as basically a straight line, your fingers are going to be perpendicular to the line of your body. And you want to make sure that you have your hand spread wide open so that you have as much surface area as possible on the ground. And you want to try and feel the weight in your fingers as opposed to in your palm. If you feel like the weight's here, try and lean over yourself more so that you can push into the ground and resist with your fingertips. To enter the Airbaby, place your weight-bearing arm on the floor and get a comfortable grip. Next, place your free hand about 1.5 shoulder widths above it in an almost straight line over your head. Put your knee on your elbow and find your alignment, and then continue to engage with your hamstring. You want to sink a little bit of weight into the overhead hand so that the free leg is able to come up off the floor, and then a few things are going to happen pretty simultaneously. First of all, you're going to open the top hip to the side. This is not a big dramatic or overly extended feeling. If you overextend your leg, it tends to make your weight arch behind you and then you're going to fall. It's just a matter of turning your hip out. As the free leg goes up, you're going to engage the lat of your base arm. This is super important. The lat is the main stabilizing muscle in your Airbaby, so you want to constantly be firing it. Once the free leg has gone up and turned out, You're gonna lower it back down again slightly and lean your weight back towards the free foot. It's really subtle, but this is gonna reduce the weight that is in the free hand over your head and allow you to shift your weight up to your fingertips. As you shift up to your fingertips, you should try and have as much weight as possible in the base hand. You wanna just very subtly lift the weight off your fingertips and let your hand come up into the air. As the hand comes off the ground, it's important to focus less on the actual hand lifting motion and more on the action of balancing yourself. Something that really helps that feeling is thinking about lifting your torso away from the floor. And I don't mean tilting it upright, I mean simply rising away from the floor. And the way you do that is by flexing the lat. It sounds kind of weird, but just imagine you're trying to get away from the ground without changing your angle. If you momentarily lapse attention from your lat and your hamstring, then you're probably gonna fall. So think less about, oh, I have to lift my hand, and more about the hand can lift because you have all your attention on the base hand. Once you're up in the air Airbaby, you wanna balance yourself using all those muscles we talked about, but also think about using your free arm and your free leg either as a seesaw motion or both raising and lowering at the same time, depending on where the actual imbalance is coming from. Remember that with all your balancing, you want to have small, subtle motions rather than big, violent ones. Try not to overcorrect for a problem. Alright, now that you understand the basic idea of an Airbaby, here are a couple drills and exercises that'll help out. You can take an Airbaby shape and then try to hold on to a counterbalance, in this case a heavy full water bottle, or even just a solid object like a table. A really common drill people use is to go from having 5 fingers on the ground to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, and then finally lifting the hand. And that's great. I think that's a good thing to try, but it's worth noting that it doesn't matter how many fingers are on the floor because there shouldn't be any weight in any of your fingers. That said, holding this for longer times because you're shifting from 5 to 4 and so on is going to build for longer holds and therefore more strength. Another thing that's going to happen, probably whether you consciously want it to happen or not, is just tapping the free hand on the ground or the free foot on the ground to continue to balance yourself without maintaining a perfect shape. If you've been working on your Airbaby for a few weeks and you still can't dial it in, here's a few things that might be going wrong. As I mentioned at the top of the tutorial, wearing fabric can cause a lot of slippage, so if you're still having issues and your position seems to be good, try shorts and a t-shirt. Most people instinctively hold their breath when they first try the Airbaby, and don't. Try to exhale as you enter the Airbaby and just get into a rhythm of natural breathing. If you feel like you can't get the weight off of your free hand, your chest might be too low, and if your chest is too low, you might be raising your free leg too high. If you still have any weight whatsoever in the fingertips of your free hand before you lift it up, don't lift it up. When you lift your hand, you want to make it really slow and really subtle. You can just float your fingertips just like a millimeter above the ground. It doesn't have to be some grand gesture, and if it is some grand gesture, there's a good chance you're gonna throw your weight off and fall over. Remember that as you're lifting that hand, you have to be thinking less about floating the hand and more about engaging and balancing yourself. I sometimes see people prepping for the Airbaby with their hand out to the side rather than over their head. And while this is totally a possible way to enter an Airbaby, once you lift your hand, it's just going to go over your head anyway. If you find your arm floating out next to you instead of overhead as you balance yourself, then you might be arching your back or putting your leg behind you. Another reason it might be hard to get the weight out of your free hand is if you don't open your hip. If you find that your knee keeps slipping off of the elbow, make sure you're continuously engaging your hamstring and pulling your heel towards your butt. Think of your base arm as the support column that holds up the whole Airbaby. So just like any building, if the support arm deviates from vertical in any way, you're gonna fall. Make sure that the stack stays aligned vertically. Until you're comfortable balancing a regular Airbaby, don't bend the top leg because that'll tend to make you arch. And it's also worth noting, if you have a straight leg, don't arch with that either. I've seen some b-boys place their knee much higher on the tricep than the way I taught it in this tutorial. If it works for you, it works for you. But I find that having the knee in the elbow groove is a really consistent, helpful way of learning. Make sure your knee is stacked properly and not on the outside of your elbow like a frog stand. I've seen some people try and just jump straight into the one-arm Airbaby and hold the position. And to me, that seems like the equivalent of a toddler learning to stand on one foot by just jumping onto one foot. Work your way up with 2 arms and you will get your Airbaby much, much faster than if you just continuously try to jump onto it. This is a really big one. The closer your free arm is to your base arm, the harder it's going to be to shift your weight to the base arm. This is the reason I recommend having your free hand 1.5 shoulder widths away from your base hand when you enter the Airbaby. It just means it's going to be a more minimal weight shift and much easier to control. Once you can hold the Airbaby, you might be thinking, okay, what can I do to make this more interesting or more aesthetically pleasing? You can try entering it from a headstand or a handstand, really just trying to find new ways to build more control and versatility. With time and practice, you'll be able to enter the Airbaby quickly, because no one's going to wait for you in the middle of a b-boy battle to do this whole elaborate setup, but it takes time and practice. As a b-boy, you probably want to flex your feet. As a hand balancer, you probably want to point your feet. As a yogi, you probably want to do that active foot releve thing that they do. With your free hand, there's also a ton of options. If you're a yoga influencer on Instagram, you might want to do a little mudra. And if you're not, you might want to just point your hand like a knife hand or give you one of these. Regardless of what you do with your feet and with your hand, this is actually a great drill to build control, because if you can consciously decide to do something with the body parts that don't make the Airbaby work, then you're building control and learning how to subconsciously balance. So I highly recommend just getting up into an Airbaby, flexing a foot, pointing a foot, flexing your wrist, just trying all different things to create more control while continuing to balance yourself. As a part 2 to this tutorial, I'll be releasing a video of Airbaby variations pretty soon, so hopefully this tutorial helps you learn the standard Airbaby, and by the time that comes out, you'll be ready to try some new stuff. With all these tricks, remember that they take time to learn, and even if they look effortless, it's actually quite a difficult process. Don't get too discouraged if it hurts at first, or if it takes you multiple weeks just to learn your first Airbaby. It's a process. In the meantime, if you're struggling and you can't seem to figure out why, feel free to send me a video on Instagram at Scott A. McDonald, and I'll very happily take a look at anything you want and give you feedback. As always, thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment if there's anything that you found particularly helpful or any tricks that you would like a tutorial for. Thank you and good luck!